Tattva Vikurvanat Sambhavat. Okay. Word for word translation. Mahatattvat, from the Mahatattva. Vikurvanat, undergoing a change. Bhagavat Virya Sambhavat, evolved from the Lord's own energy. Kriya Shakti, endowed with active power. Ahankara, the material ego. Trividaha, of three kinds. Samapatyata, sprang up. So I'm just gonna read the second verse as well. Vaikarikas taijascha tamasascha yato bhava manasaschendriyanam cha bhutanam mahatapapi. So I'm gonna read this as well, and maybe you can just repeat from hearing. Vaikarika, material ego in transformed goodness. Taijasaha, material ego in passion. Cha, and. Tamasaha, material ego in ignorance. Cha, also. Yataha, from which. Bhavaha, the origin. Manasaha, of the mind. Cha, and. Indriyanam, of the senses for perception and action. Cha, and. Bhutanam Mahatam, of the five gross elements. Api, also. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the sense of perception, the organs of action, and the cross elements evolve. Purport. In the beginning, from clear consciousness, or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego, or identification of the body as self. The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, but he has marginal independence. And this allows him to forget Krishna. Originally, pure Krishna consciousness exists, but because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. In the Upanishads, it is stated, therefore, that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely, but as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheek because he mishandles the razor. Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the state of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there's always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material action. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind, and from this material mind, the senses and material organs become manifest. Om Akyanti Mirandasya Kyananjana Shalakaya Shakshu Militamina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sorry Basha, could you maybe I can do it myself, but not the other side. Because maybe you can move it in such a way that we can see what is drawn there. Because I just thought for this topic, it's kind of like easier like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, everyone can see more or less? Okay. So today I thought we're going to probably have to laugh half of the time because Ramananda will make sounds or jokes. But this is very good actually. Okay, so today this verse is obviously about the material ego and the entanglement of the material ego, and in the material world with the senses, mind, intelligence. And I've drawn this picture here because it's just going to make it easier to understand this concept. Because in one sense it's very simple, but it's also a bit technical. But what is very important is we're going to make this very practical. Yeah. But you do have to be attentive, because if you let's say you fall asleep for 5 minutes or so, then you miss some foundations and then it's going to be more difficult to catch up with the rest of it. So I'm going to try to make this also a little bit interactive. Prabhupada mentions here in the purport that there's always a chance of falling down, and that it's kind of the nature of the soul to have free will. Only because we have free will becomes the love that we have with Krishna meaningful. So therefore Prabhupada mentions that we have to practice Krishna consciousness very, very carefully and attentively, because at every stage there's a chance of falling down. And this little graphic, or understanding the mechanics of our internal psychology, the yoga psychology, is actually going to make us more aware of how we can control the mind and also in the end transform the mind. Yeah. Okay. So let's start by understanding first of all the different functions of the different elements. Yeah. So sometimes in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada he writes about the mind, and the word chitta and manas is translated as the mind. However, technically, they are a little bit different. So when we have, of course, the senses. We have ear, skin, eye, tongue, nose. I guess that's kind of simple to understand. And then the sense input comes to the mind, manas. Okay? And what does the mind do? The simple function of the mind. Anyone knows the function of the mind? Accepting, rejecting, like and dislike. Yeah. So, but of course it's a bit more. There's a bit more connected to it, because the mind is also thinking, feeling, and willing, desiring to act. But in principle, there's some input coming to our senses, and then we're going to like it or dislike it, accept it or reject it. And how do we make such a decision? So first of all, there is a very strong connection between our mind, the manas, and the samskaras. Samskaras are impressions on our consciousness from many previous lifetimes. And let's say, for example, let's say we have a brahmachari, and there's already a reason why he decides to become a brahmachari, because he has certain sankalpas saved in his subconscious mind. So then when he has to make a decision whether he should get married or not, the mind will accept or reject that also on those sankalpas, on those subconscious samskaras, or what did I say? I'm sorry, yeah. Samskaras. And this is going to be part of how we're going to make a decision. That's not the only factor, but that's some of the factors. That's why when we go in different environments, we react differently. Okay? Because the mind is influenced by those samskaras, impressions of the consciousness, by the environment we are in, and by the actions we do. So for example, when we're here in the temple, we are very much protected. And once some of us will move out, they will start to understand that maintaining Krishna consciousness is not as easy, because we have here, ideally, the mode of goodness, or even higher, that kind of protects us. And then, of course, our actions. Are we going to practice Krishna consciousness, engage in spiritual activities, or are we going to use our senses to engage in material activities? All of this is influencing the mind. And these samskaras, or the karma that the mind carries, most of it is already pre-designed. Yeah, it's the different planets working on our mind that will, decide what kind of mindset we have when we are born in this world. Now, here's a very interesting thing, and this is very relevant, especially for parents. Buddhi is intelligence, of course. It's kind of like what translates the input of the mind to our ahankara, our false ego. Buddhi is kind of like the intelligence that makes plans, that also judges the input of the senses. Now, when you have a child, the buddhi is very weak. So basically, anything you tell a child leaves a deep impression on their consciousness. Okay? So therefore, especially in the first 5 years, when buddhi, the intelligence, is not very strong, it's very, very important what kind of input we receive. For example, when we hear you're a failure, you just can't get anything done, you're useless, it's just coming in. It's just directly manifesting at the samskaras that are directly connected to the ahankara, our material identity. So, which is also why buddhi is so important when we practice spiritual life, because it's kind of a filter between the manas and the ahankara. And of course, let's say, for example, we are tempted by something. Let's say we are in the pujari room, and we want to take some. The doors open. We see there are some mahasweets, and we just know Ramananda said in the morning we shouldn't take them because we need them for guests. Okay, so then I'm just giving a light example. So then the mind sees the sweets. And then the mind is going to be like, I like sweets. I like sweets. I accept sweets. Now, what happens next is hopefully we have buddhi there. I'm not making a general statement whether you should go and take mahasweets or not. I'm just giving an example. So then buddhi comes, the intelligence. And then maybe buddhi comes, wait a minute. Ramananda Gopal Prabhu said this morning that we need the sweets for the guests. So I won't take them. Okay? But if we have very weak intelligence, then maybe we just go for it and eat them, and then afterwards we realize, and when we're just still eating them, suddenly Ramananda appears and we get chastised. But of course there are other situations in life where this can be much more serious. For example, when we decide to get married. Okay? We fall in love with a nice Prabhu or a nice Vaishnavi, yeah? So we become very attracted. Now, then we go to, because we are somewhat cultured, we decide we go to our leader and we tell them, look, Prabhu, this Vaishnavi, I feel quite attracted. And then this leader tells us, I don't think it's such a good idea, because, she is already associating with someone else. She's 10 years older and she has already 3 children. I don't think it's such a good idea. So now what happens, it's like the mind is already attached. And why is the mind attached? Not just because we like the particular woman that we see, but also our samskaras are impacting. Maybe most of the people we are attracted to or we like or dislike, we have previous karma with, So then these samskaras and the mind are kind of creating emotions. Oh, if I would be with that Vaishnavi, then I would be happy. Then all my desires would be fulfilled. I have to be with that woman, and I think she likes me too, because at Guru Puja I could see, she was actually watching at me, and she's a devotee after all. That is basically all I need. So we become attached. Now, buddhi can come in, the intelligence. But where is it going to come from? So if we haven't really spent time studying Srila Prabhupada's books, if we haven't heard Shastra, if we haven't studied this topic of how we are meant to get into a relationship, then our buddhi will be very weak. And then we will make a decision that, oh, it feels good. That means it's Krishna. That means I should go ahead. So then we don't listen, and then we make a decision that can cause us a lot of issues for many, many years to come, just as an example. And therefore, it is so important to strengthen our intelligence. Another example, let's say confidence. Let's say we struggle with confidence because as a child, we were not encouraged. We were constantly told we can't do anything, that we shouldn't do anything. Don't touch this, don't do this. Just get away from here, so we develop low self-confidence. Now, there will be situations in life that will trigger this confidence situation. And what happens here is that let's say there's a situation, we are meant to cook. We burn the sweet rice, and then suddenly the samskara comes up. I'm a failure. I can't do anything. I don't have any confidence. So those thoughts come up. Now, the intelligence has to come. Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and I'm going to read this to you because this always carries power, if I find the verse now. Because now the intelligence has to come in. Here. Yes. Okay, some of you might know it by heart. Evam buddhe param bhutva samstapa yatam manam atmana jahi chatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Okay? So we have to spiritualize our intelligence. So when we have those negative beliefs or negative thoughts come up, our intelligence has to become active and say, no, you are a soul, you are a servant of God. You are connected to the source of all power. You can be confident in your service to Krishna. Just an example. Another example would be, when we become very, very proud. Oh, this was such an amazing kirtan I was leading, and I was singing Indra Prabhu's tune, and I saw everyone liked it, and everyone was, Krishna is the doer, but I really have a talent here, and I really worked on it. I really practiced playing, all those hours, so I could come here Saturday evening and give this amazing, kirtan. This is amazing. So again, now is our buddhi going to come and, wait a minute, everything comes from Krishna, all your abilities, all your skills, all your talents. And your buddhi, if it's spiritualized, if it's in the higher modes, it's going to protect you from identifying with this whole thing here. Okay, ahankara is basically our material identity. I identify myself as this body, with this mind, with this psychophysical nature, okay? And if our buddhi is not strong, if it's not developed by reading Shastra, by hearing, by studying, then it's not going to become active. And why did Srila Prabhupada emphasize that we do things again and again and again and again, every single day? Mangala Arti, Nishingadev prayers, Tulasi Arti, Japa, Bhagavatam class. We heard a million times, we're the soul, we're not the body. Prabhupada says it in every lecture, basically. Why does he keep repeating and repeating it? Because only if there's some repetition, does it reach more subconscious states of our consciousness. Like if we just read, okay, the material springs up from Mahatattva, which is evolved with the Lord's own energy, the material is endowed. We just read, okay, now I've done my quota of reading, I'm done. No, we have to contemplate it. We have to make jnana into vijnana, into realized knowledge. Because otherwise, when we're really triggered, when we're doing some service in the kitchen and then someone comes, why are you doing it like that? I told you before, you shouldn't, use this pot. And then we get very agitated. So what are we going to do? Are we going to respond with anger, passion, and ignorance? Or is our buddhi active? And we calm down and we say, okay, sorry, Prabhu. And then everything calms down. And then later on, that Vaishnava or Vaishnavi comes and says, oh, I'm sorry for that situation. I was just very stressed. So therefore, this is so critical. And especially for a sadhika. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in Chaitanya Shikshamrita, I believe is the name. I'm not fully sure, but I believe that's the name. He writes that until we reach the stage of Nishta, our spiritual practice, Jai Shri Shri Palat Nishingadev Ki Jai, our spiritual practice very much depends on our own endeavor, but with understanding that only by Krishna's mercy can we progress and make advancement. But it depends on our own endeavor. And if our buddhi is not strong and developed, what's going to happen? We think we are the doer. Like we totally think, even as devotees, we are the doer. I like this temple, I don't like that temple. I like this service, I don't like that service. I like this person, I don't like that person. And I don't like this person because, they have some anarthas they have not taken care of. Actually, there's something wrong with them. Actually, this place, this temple, the leaders, they got it wrong. It's the leaders, they what is it? The modes of nature dragging us through this material universe again and again. And we think, I'm the doer. I made the decision. I made a lot of money. I lost a lot of money. These are my children. This is my family. This is, we're actually not in control. Most of us, we're constantly controlled by the modes of material nature. And only if we develop our buddhi and it starts to become active and we spiritualize it, our buddhi, our intelligence. What does that mean? Spiritualize means it comes under the energy of Krishna, under the protection of Krishna. Then, when our intelligence is spiritualized, we can start to make proper decisions. And we're not anymore controlled by the modes of material nature. We start to act on the higher modes of goodness, and ideally, eventually, we come to the platform even of Shuddha Sattva. So, this is a very, very important concept to understand and also to observe in our consciousness. We come now to the point of chitta. This is our conditioned consciousness. We need to understand what's going on in here. Otherwise, we'll just act out of impulses and emotions that pop up. And we're not going to act on spiritual higher principles. So, as you can see here, as described here, when we come to this material world, it's because, there's some curiosity, some independence, that there's something apart from Krishna and Krishna's service that we want to explore. So the ahankara becomes manifest. And our sat, chit, ananda, chit, our consciousness becomes conditioned consciousness, chitta. It's a little bit like I know it's already a bit it's already a bit technical, I know. But what's the difference between chitta and which is conditioned consciousness? That's the whole thing here, ahankara, buddhi, and manas. That's the chitta, conditioned consciousness. What is the difference between that and pure consciousness? So basically, it's like you're watching a screen on a movie, okay? And you have a neighbor. So you are the soul, and your neighbor is the super soul, the witness. You know, you remember the state of Bhagavad Gita? The tree, the bird. One bird is eating the fruits, and the other one is just the witness. So we're in the cinema, we're watching at the screen, and that energy of consciousness is the chitta. And the screen where the movie is played is manas. You know, the screen of the mind. Like if I tell you now, don't think of Tulasi Maharani. Basically, most of you will just pop up a little bit, you know, hopefully a picture of Tulasi Maharani. So that's the screen of your mind. Just to understand. Okay, so I do want to make this also practical. So, what is important to understand is that most of us, we're just like a computer program that is running according to previous samskaras from previous lifetimes, according to the modes of material nature. We are absolutely and fully controlled. And changes, especially for someone who is not on the higher changes of Krishna consciousness, comes through studying Shastra, comes through the connection with Krishna. Now here's the interesting thing. What happens when we chant the holy name? Where is it going to work on? All of them? You say all of them? Okay. Any other input? Okay, nice. Uh-huh. Right. 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 So what I'm hearing here, I'm just saying for the online audience, so it starts with the senses and then goes through the mind, buddhi, you know, ahankara, and the soul. So, and Basha mentioned it works on all of them. Yeah. Is this always the case? No, it's not always the case. Why? Because we can chant on different levels. we can chant on the level of the soul. That's when I hope, and most of you had this experience when you were chanting or in a kirtan and suddenly you experienced something special. You know, something that, or when you were doing some service, at some point you must have experienced something, hopefully, that made you convinced that, okay, I'm going to sign up for this. I'm going to wear the bed sheets, shave my head, and I'm going to go for it. So, yes, when we chant, it's transcendental sound. But actually, when we chant on lower consciousness, on tamagun, rajagun, you know, the sound never really works deep down on our heart. The holy name is not different from Krishna, but the holy name also descends and becomes present when we chant it in the right state of consciousness. Therefore, some of us, we can chant for decades and many, many lifetimes because the sound comes to the ear through the ether and it never really penetrates the soul. Like for example, therefore it's so important that we chant attentively. Because if we don't chant attentively, then it stays here with the manas. It doesn't even go deeper to the buddhi or to the, you know, different layers of the subtle body, and it doesn't really reach the soul. So when we start chanting, we're like, I'm going to do this today and that, and let me look at, you know, it's just like in and out and in and out. There's not much purification going on. There's surely some purification might be there, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur says millions of lifetimes you can chant like that. So, and same when we are reading. On what level are we reading? Is it just like, you know, in and out? Even on the level of the intelligence, in one sense, it's not enough ultimately. You know, like it has to really go deep has to become realized knowledge. We have to, it has to be even connected to some kind of emotion, our knowledge. So it really leaves an imprint on our consciousness. So yeah, like that. And also our devotional service. Are we like, like for example, there was Chaturdashi, and out of Ramananda Gopal Prabhu's mercy, I was allowed to, when we were doing the Abhishek, to fill, the cups for the pujaris. So I was basically as close as someone could be who is not, second initiated. As close as possible. But as I was doing, it was kind of like, the pujaris were, we need more. And I was kind of filling them up. And I was like, and more people were there. Everything was packed. And then at one point I was like, wait a minute. Whoa. I'm allowed to do this special service, but I'm not at all present. I'm not at all in a grateful consciousness. I'm not at all connected to the Lord. I'm basically not even doing devotional service right now. So therefore we have to think when we are in the temple, we might actually not really do devotional service. We might just do a material activity. Of course, we live in the temple, and yes, there is going to be some benefit, and yes, this is the Dham, but what kind of consciousness are you in? This is going to determine on what level, what impact this is going to have. Prabhupada said you can become Krishna consciousness in a minute in one lecture. So if we constantly practice on the level of Atma, then yeah, we'll be a pure devotee in a moment. But of course, there will be different samskaras that will impact us, and it will realistically take some more time. Okay, so maybe one more thing about emotions, because I heard the statement very often that all emotions come from the soul. But actually not really, because yes, emotions come from the soul, but also emotions are just saved in our subconscious mind. Okay, have a nice day at school, Sri Manjari. So our emotions are saved in our subconscious mind. They can even cause us to become sick. So emotions are, our subconscious emotions that really push us to act in certain ways, they are really saved in these samskaras. But you can't just think of samskaras just as a layer. This is just to help you to understand, this a little bit better. But they are saved in our consciousness. You can think of as layers around the soul, covering the soul. Okay? So emotions can also be triggered from the external environment. Let's say a lion would jump in here suddenly. A lion would jump in this temple room. No, from this side, not from here. No, he would come from here. So a proper lion, and he would roar. So then we would have, every one of us would to some degree probably experience some kind of fear. Why? Because it's part of our human identity, and we need it to survive. But to what degree we will experience fear is going to be depending on those samskaras. Maybe in the previous life we were killed by a lion, so when we even get close to a lion, hopefully not here, I guess here it's transformed. Let's take a tiger. You're killed by a tiger, so when a tiger jumps in here, some of you will freak out. Maybe run, start screaming, and us, we're like, oh wow, that's such a beautiful animal. So, but still you be a little bit in like awe, So there be different kinds of reactions according to those samskaras that we have. Okay. And therefore, our mind can be in tamagun, rajagun, or sattvagun. Our intelligence can be in different states, and our ahankara. But the intelligence is the key element here. Is that clear? It's kind of the translator from the input of the mind, and is going to decide what is going to leave an imprint on our consciousness, on our samskaras. And our ego, ahankara, identifies with all of it. Yeah, so therefore that's key. Let me see. This was already a lot to digest, I think. I'm researching this anyway, therefore I thought I'm going to share it today. There's more to share. I'm just wondering if already there are some questions before I move on. Is it, yeah? Okay.
Same question I asked yesterday about the emotions. You said not all of them come from the Atma, but I don't know where the other part comes from. But my question would be like, is it safe to say that all emotions are actually coming from the Atma, but somehow filtered or being reflected, perverted, whatever you want to say, in a different way? Like being somehow transformed into material emotions, so quote-unquote material emotions like lust, envy, anger, and so on.
I would say this is it's very technical, and what from my research, what I understand, and now I'm quoting Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. He has a website, The Spiritual Scientist, but also from Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. So, because the thing is see, emotions. It's not like emotions are always like just triggered from the soul. That would mean emotions are dynamic. That they just like you have an experience and then an emotion comes up. But already every one of us has certain emotions imprinted on them. Some of us have anger, lust, envy, certain emotions that are already part of our conditioned consciousness. So the emotions can come from our soul, and then they could be covered. But at the same time, we also have emotions that also already part of our subconscious, of our conditioned mind, conditioned consciousness. So meaning, for example, some people, they have an experience in a previous lifetime that caused them to have anger inside of them. Now in this lifetime, a similar situation happens, and trust me, this happens all the time, and the same emotion gets triggered, anger. Now they deal with the emotion in the mode of ignorance, which also we as devotees do a lot. Control them, suppress them. So now the emotion is stuck in our body, and the emotion actually, if it stays there, physically changes our physical body and can even cause us to become sick. Yeah. So therefore, it's not that every emotion is just coming from the soul. Originally, everything is coming from the soul. The tendency to feel, it's a bit technical. Yeah. But what this Chaitanya Charan Prabhu mentioned, emotions can come from three ways: the soul, the inner state that we already carry, and from external situations. Like I mentioned, the tiger comes in, fear, like that. Because the soul would see the tiger, I'm going to get to you, and would see the soul in the tiger and Krishna in the tiger. Why would it get scared? Do you understand a little bit? Is it a bit more clear? It's quite technical. I'll need to research it more, but it gives you some idea, yes?
Well, you have to understand the soul has the capacity to have emotions.
Right.
Yes, all emotions come from the soul, but what we face is a material contamination of emotions.
Right.
The real emotion we experience as emotions right now,
Right.
they're all coming through the input of the senses. And this is what media and advertisement they use.
Right.
To trigger these
Right.
emotions through the senses,
Yeah.
and they go only to the mind, to the manas, and maybe
To the ahankara.
the buddhis here, and
Or skip the buddhi. Yeah.
they're all working then together.
Yeah.
But what we actually need is, and this is our training program and sadhana,
Yeah.
to kind of clear out what are these material emotions, to make a
Exactly.
way
Yeah.
to clear out the emotions actually coming from the Atma. That's what
Right.
we see in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the spiritual world is only emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
This is all. But
Yeah.
we have to clear them all out. It's the same like with the body.
Exactly.
So
Right. Exactly. But it's not just that the input triggers the emotion. There's three things. Emotions can come directly from the soul, and they can already be in our conditioned mind.
Because they came previously through
Exactly. They came already, but ultimately in this life, all of us, we carry them already. So I noted that down somewhere, but there are basically these three ways. But you're right, and that brings us to the next stage. It's about these samskaras, this conditioned consciousness needs to be purified. These material emotions, these attachments, desires, and all of those, they need to be purified. But there are various ways to do that. I'm wondering if I should go into this. I'm just wondering if there's any other question about the understanding. Yeah. Can be, yeah. Should be, yeah. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Exactly, yeah. Very beautiful point. So Ananda Krishna Prabhu was just saying that we can consciously make a choice of our identity by, using our intelligence to reinforce either I'm a servant of Krishna, yeah, or, just identifying with this body. But then there's, of course, also Dharma. Usually it doesn't work that you can just fully skip everything. So the ahankara is also in different modes. And ahankara in the mode of goodness would be practicing a certain dharma. Yeah. Right. Yeah, okay, yeah. Theoretically it's possible, and in fact, yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
Where would you say Dharma is located here in this picture?
No, but it's the ahankara. So the ahankara will have a certain tendency in this life. It will be, and it's also actually it's a so the ahankara will be in different modes, and you could say, well, if it's in the mode of goodness, naturally it'll be a pramana. If it's in passion, then it will be kshatriya. If it's in passion and ignorance, vaishya, and ignorance, shudra. So that is there. However, at the same time, if you read Bhagavatam, before Bhagavatam even starts to speak about the varnas, it gives the qualities of being a human being. And they are all far out, forgiveness, humility, practicing celibacy, and all of those things. So actually, it's not that when you are, like, let's say you have a Shudra varna, that means you're in the mode of ignorance. No, you want to be a Shudra in the mode of goodness. But the Dharma, the identity is in the Ahankara. And in the samskaras, yeah.
Well, I would also say it starts with the senses, because a sutra has to have different bodily features.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
What triggers then his ahangara, somebody is like a ogre,
Right.
sure that he identifies more as a worker than somebody
Priest or, yeah. Yes, however, the ahankara manifests all of it, like first the ahankara and then the subtle manifests across.
Dharma also comes with something. I mean, it comes from previous lives as well. So
Right.
we sit somewhere in the samskaras, maybe.
Yeah, that's what. So samskaras, it's not like it's. You can think of it like this. Like it's all samskaras are. They're not just. Like the samskaras directly impact the manas, the mind. The buddhi can come in between. It doesn't have to. For most people, it doesn't. Most people it's like, this feels good, I go for it. This doesn't feel good, I don't go for it. So, but the dharma, the material identity, is the ahankara, and the ahankara is based on the samskaras, right? Right. However, they manifest from the ahankara. The subtle manifest the gross. That's what's said in Bhagavad Gita. The mind is higher than the senses, and the intelligence is higher than the mind, and the soul is higher than the buddhi. Right? So like that.
I think it's a little difficult discussion because these are the concepts and these are kind of categories, but they are all interconnected.
Of course.
Interactive.
Yeah.
To find now a clear cut.
It's like on this picture here. This is just to help you to make it very, very simple. But they are all interacting with each other. You can't think of it like, it's just like, in the beginning we think like the stages of devotional service is like, now I'm on anatta nivritti. Now you have some percentage of anatta nivritti, some percentage of each stage at any time. So it's very dynamic. So it's here, it's as well. This is just to really simplify it and help us to understand it. But this is not the only way to describe it or the only way to, yeah.
All of us are not so trained in this yogic psychology.
Exactly.
To really understand. And
Right.
we, according to our level of advancement
Yeah.
and practical experience, that can more understand this thing.
Exactly.
So in one sense, we are a little turning in the circle because we take what we know from Prabhupada and Shastra,
Right.
our limited understanding, so we can to some degree understand that, and this is actually it. But if you go further into more details, I think we are in the speculative area.
Right, but we also saying the same thing in one sense, because like I will take your questions. Okay. Ja. Okay, ja. Ja, jeder versteht Deutsch? Ja, wir können ja jetzt, also mein Punkt ist hier, auch was du gerade gesagt hast, ist unsere Identität jetzt hier bei den Sinnen oder im Geist oder in der Intelligenz oder im falschen Ego, überall. Ne, was jetzt zuerst kommt, das ist eigentlich auch sehr klar definiert in Shastra, aber das bringt uns jetzt von dem vielleicht auch dem wirklich Nützlichen, weil es geht ja darum, so ein bisschen zu verstehen, dass wir auch beobachten, okay, wo ist der Geist, wie kommt die Intelligenz da rein, dass wir verstehen, dass wir eigentlich die ganze Zeit wie ein Computerprogramm laufen und vollkommen von den Erscheinungsweisen kontrolliert sind. Erst wenn wir in der Erscheinungsweise der Tugend voll etabliert sind, dann fangen wir an, dann können wir wirklich erst richtig Krishna-Bewusstsein ausüben. Weil vorher sind wir klar, man kann jetzt sagen, natürlich ist Krishna-Bewusstsein, wirkt es auf jeder Ebene, auch wenn wir in der Erscheinungsweise der Unwissenheit sind, können wir uns schon reinigen. Aber erst wenn wir wirklich auf dieser Sattva-Ebene sind, können wir wirklich so richtig, sage ich mal, abheben und wirklich den Zustand von Nishta erreichen. Weil Nishta heißt ja, dass 75% unserer Anattas, also Samskaras, gereinigt sind, transformiert sind. Und dann kommt diese Stetigkeit von der Erscheinungsweise der Tugend und dann ist es ja bergab. Und vorher ist es ein Bergauf und wir müssen wirklich uns richtig endeavern. Und dann werden wir von dem Taste, den wir plötzlich erfahren, getragen. Also jetzt weiß ich gar nicht, wie ich da hingekommen bin, aber ja, diese Elemente sind alle miteinander verbunden. Das heißt, du hast schon recht, wenn jemand ein Kshatriya ist, dann wird das sich auf diese ganzen Ebenen auswirken, bemerkbar machen. Aber auch nicht unbedingt so, dass man jetzt zum Beispiel, nehmen wir mal Yudhisthira Maharaj und Bhima. Beides sind Kshatriyas. Aber ihr Körper war anders, ihre Mentalität war anders. Also selbst da, da machen wir jetzt wieder eine neue Box auf, selbst dort ist es auch nicht schwarz und weiß, dass, okay, Shudra ist jetzt einfach der Arbeiter, sondern, ja, das ist nochmal ein anderes Thema. Also wenn wir jetzt in die Varnas gehen, dann ist auch ein Thema, was ich finde, wir in unserer Bewegung noch nicht so richtig voll durchleuchtet haben. Also relevant und praktisch gemacht haben. Ist meistens so, okay, der studiert gerne oder macht Pujari-Service, der ist ein Priester, der ist feurig, er ist Kshatriya, der Geld. So machen wir das häufig. Also habe ich beobachtet, aber es ist schon ein bisschen anders.
Was auch dann angesprochen hat, im Körper,
Ja,
es ist schon interessant, dass schon auch die Physiognomie auch mit dem Warna wieder zusammenhängt. Und das wird dann total rassistisch letztendlich.
aber
Total rassistisch, ganz kurz,
ja,
in den Shastra
ja,
heißt Brahman auch Shukla.
ja,
Und das heißt, die Shudras, die sind dunkelhäutig,
aha,
weiß.
ja,
Je heller, desto höher. Und Brahman sagt auch manchmal, hat auch mal gesagt, das ist nur weiß. Also es, sag ich nur, es geht total in eine rassistische Richtung. Nicht, dass ich das befürworte oder bewerte. Ich sage nur, dass es krasse Ausmaße auch annehmen kann, dieses Physiognomische dann auch anzutragen. Und dass man, weil das der Körper ist ja auch eine Manifestation von Karma, von Dharma und so weiter. Es ist
das ist interessant.
auf allen Ebenen mal, wie auch hier jemand auf allen Ebenen kann sich das.
Man müsste dann aber auch sehen, im Kali-Yuga passiert nämlich was, also ich meine, es gibt ja, man sieht das jetzt häufiger, dass selbst jemand, der wirklich, das kannst du dann auch, sage ich mal, im Horoskop sehen, einfach total alles feminin, also also eigentlich die Psychologie einer Frau, aber ist in einem männlichen Körper. Oder, also ich habe schon viele Beobachtungen so gemacht, wo jemand die Mentalität nicht mit dem Körper übereinstimmt. Und das ist dann im Kali-Yoga, wo man dann verwirrt ist, wo dann in anderen Yogas, wo es dann schon vom physischen Körper, aber zur selben Zeit, das ist ein Element, weil selbst, so wie ich das verstehe, in der Gurukul wurde der Schüler mehrere Jahre beobachtet, bevor das Vana bestimmt worden ist. Also ist auch nicht so gegangen, okay, Horoskop, okay, physische Erscheinungen, okay, du hast das Vana. Sondern es ist wirklich letzten Endes die Mentalität. Und das ist auch ein ganz, ganz spannendes Thema. Ich versuche mich da gerade so zu vertiefen, da auch noch mehr zu vertiefen, weil ich es so spannend finde und finde, wir haben das noch nicht so richtig in unserer Bewegung, ja.
Es ist so ein kompliziertes Thema,
Ja.
weil wir sind alle von Krishnas Plan am Anfang der Schöpfung so gemacht worden. Und da waren
Ja.
Brahmanas mehr weißhäutig und Shudras mehr dunkelhäutig. Aber jetzt ist das halt alles so vermischt durch unkontrollierte Sexualität, größtenteils auch.
Ja.
Dass du halt nicht mehr das wirklich sehen kannst. Aber das war schon im vorigen Zeitalter. Karna ist eigentlich das beste Beispiel,
Hm.
weil Duryodhan wollte, Quatsch, der Acharya, Dronacharya
Hm.
wollte ihn nicht trainieren, weil er von einer Shudra-Familie gekommen ist, ohne dass er jetzt auf seine körperlichen Merkmale als erstes geachtet hat. Ne? Und dann aber Parashuran hat ihn trainiert, weil er ehrlich gewesen ist und hat gesagt, es muss ein Brahmana sein. Nachdem er ihn dann mehr beobachtet hat, hat er gesehen, der reagiert, als ihn dieser Käfer, was immer das gewesen ist,
Ja.
weil ein Bein weggefressen hat oder was, und sagt, nee, das muss ein Kshatriya sein. Also selbst da gab es schon diese Verwirrungen oder das
Genau.
so danach gekommen sind, aber das ist, weil das halt immer mehr degeneriert. Und jetzt im Kali-Yuga, deswegen ist es vollkommen, deswegen Mahaprabhu sagt, Nabi Vaishnav Shudra, Nahambipona, ne? Wir sind dieses nicht. Und wenn wir uns jetzt darauf konzentrieren, auch wenn es wichtig wäre, anyway, das ist jetzt auch schon wieder, für manche ist es wichtig, für andere ist es nicht wichtig, sich darauf zu konzentrieren. Weil, wie du sagst, in den Samskaras sind so viel von einer Frau drin, in dieser Blase, in dieser Cloud. Samskara ist ja wie so eine Cloud, wo der Geist drin connect und die Sinne und alles. Und das kommt mit dem Feinstoff im Körper in den neuen Körper. Diese Samskaras kreieren ja diesen neuen Körper. Und dann bist du aber irgendwie in dem männlichen Körper und hast halt die Mentalität von einer Frau, weil du vorneweg als Frau gehandelt hast.
Dann würde man jetzt aber sagen, dass es dafür einen Grund gibt. Na, aber da gehen wir jetzt, also schließen wir das kurz ab. Also ich meine, ich wollte noch mehr darüber sprechen, wie man das Ganze transformieren kann. Ich meine, wir haben das aber angeschnitten mit der Intelligenz und letzten Endes ist es natürlich den Taste, den wir entwickeln für Krishna-Bewusstsein. Also die Emotionen, die wir auch die sattvischen Emotionen, die wir mit dem Krishna-Bewusstsein verbinden, die uns wirklich tief transformieren werden. Aber das ist dann nochmal ein anderes Thema. Ja, okay.
Nee, bloß mal als Beispiel.
Ja.
Also ich denke, das ist ein sehr gutes, wie soll ich sagen, weil eigentlich im Krishna-Bewusstsein haben wir eigentlich, dass die ganzen Sinne alles einbezogen wird und transformiert wird. Das hat das Prabhupada
Ja.
gegeben von Love Feast, von Prasadam und Darshan, alles ist eigentlich dann, wir sollten es wirklich so annehmen, wie es ist, weil das transformiert uns, weil wenn wir ein Element wegnehmen, wir tun es ja mit Devotees, weil Devotees sind dann manchmal nicht so rein und so. Ich suche mir meine Devotees aus, dann nehmen wir ein Element davon weg. Wenn wir so Prasadam, ich habe mal die spezielle Diät, ich esse mal dies, dann nehmen wir ein Element davon weg. Weil wir brauchen das auch beim Chanten, wir müssen diese Dinge verstehen, um sie zu engagieren. Weil eine Bhagavatam-Klasse so aufgebaut, mit einer Diskussion, die dann eine Diskussion inspiriert, ist inspirierend, sonst gäbe es keine Diskussion, weil der Geist schaltet, die haben das alle tausendmal mittlerweile gehört oder denken das, wir haben Prabhupads Bücher, was soll ich Prabhupads Bücher noch lesen? Ich lese doch die Philosophie jetzt oder was weiß ich, ich muss die jetzt nicht nochmal lesen. Auch wenn es eine Diskussion gibt, die Sinne und alles mit einbezieht, dann ist man wieder wach. So geht mir es zumindest auch.
Genau, es geht dann einfach tiefer, wenn man über diese Dinge spricht, auch wenn ich das jetzt, also ich mache das, weil es mich einfach interessiert, bin das am Nachforschen, indem ich das jetzt präsentiere und wir diskutieren, dann geht das Ganze ja auch tiefer und lässt einen tieferen Eindruck in unserem Bewusstsein. Ja, wenn ich das jetzt einfach nur lese und dann gehe ich weiter, das hat auch seinen Sinn irgendwo, aber du hast schon recht, wenn man das diskutiert, wenn man es interaktiver macht, dann...
Das ist, was wir als Devotees machen. Warum sind bloß eine Handvoll Leute in der Bhagavatam-Klasse? Weil es halt immer wieder dahinter sitzt jemand vorne, der hört sich gerne sprechen.
Uiuiui.
Nee, aber ich meine,
Ja.
ich habe das öfters auch gesehen, auch in Mayapur, Senior-Devotees halt. Die reden einfach irgendwie und dann am Ende gab es wo die dann die ganze Zeit der Klassiker hatten, die ganze Zeit die Augen zugemacht und hat einfach das erzählt. Und es waren durchaus gute Punkte, aber ich meine, es ist so schwierig, da irgendwie konzentriert zu bleiben, weil er halt immer seine Augenmund geöffnet. Man muss halt wirklich bloß auf die Stimme und daraus noch das extrahieren, was jetzt wirklich irgendwie die Message gewesen ist. Und die meisten von uns können es halt nicht mehr.
Zur selben Zeit, letzten Endes geht es eigentlich, also das wurde mir das von meinen Seniors so gesagt, geht es beim Bhagavatam darum, eigentlich, dass wir Krishna und Krishnas Energien glorifizieren. Das heißt eigentlich der Sprecher, die Aufgabe des Sprechers ist es, wirklich so gut wie es geht, also mit Krishna verbunden zu sein und das so weiterzugeben. Und es ist eigentlich nicht die Aufgabe des Sprechers, dafür zu sorgen, dass die Audience wach bleibt. Zur selben Zeit, da haben wir jetzt eine Meinungsverschiedenheit. Aber zur selben Zeit muss man dann halt auch sehen, okay, wenn jeden Tag man einen Vortrag gibt, alle einschlafen, dann macht das natürlich auch keinen Sinn, weil dann kommt es nicht rein. Das erinnert mich an Prabhupada, der an Janmashtami einfach ein Krishna-Buch gelesen hat, bis dann auch der letzte Devotee eingeschlafen ist und Prabhupada hat trotzdem weitergelesen. Also das ist halt auch mit Prabhupads Büchern so. Natürlich nicht, wenn jemand wie ich spricht, aber jetzt sagen wir mal wirklich jemand, der powervolle Erkenntnisse hat. Dann geht es ja nicht nur um die Manas und Buddhi, sondern es geht ja darum, dass der transzendentale Sound das Atma erreicht. Deswegen auch Prabhupada hat gesagt, das sind meine Ekstasen, diese Erläuterung. Das heißt, man kann auch Prabhupads Büchern auf verschiedenen Ebenen lesen. Man kann es dem Geist lesen, der Intelligenz, man kann es aber auch auf der Seelenebene. Man kann theoretisch die Ekstasen, die Prabhupada während dieser Erläuterungen erfahren hat, wenn man es liest, selbst erfahren. Das habe ich auch einmal bei einem Senior Devotee gesehen. der hat das gelesen also ein Sannyasi, und er hat das für uns vorgelesen, und du hast gesehen, wie der hat das voll erlebt, ne? Und er hat dann, Prabhupada sagt das, und dann, also richtig authentisch, jetzt nicht irgendwie, und dann sieht man, dass man das auch auf verschiedenen Ebenen, Bhagavatam ist so echt, dass man das sogar mit seinen Sinnen wahrnehmen kann. Wenn man dann von dem, keine Ahnung, von einem Yajna, der Halbgötter liest, wenn die Sinne dann spiritualisiert sind und manchmal öffnet sich ein Fenster, kann man das dann auf einmal sehen, wahrnehmen, riechen. Ja, also das heißt, Bhagavatam ist sehr, sehr magisch. Das kann auf verschiedenen Ebenen. Aber, ja.
Es ist meine Verantwortung, meine Sinne, wenn ich chante, dass ich meine Sinne so engagiere, irgendwie, dass halt nebenmechanisch ist, dass nur auf der Ebene von meiner Hand ist. Verantwortung, da eine Vorkehrung zu machen.
Ja.
Ich denke, in gewisser Weise ist es die Verantwortung von den Sprechern, wenn du willst, dass deine
Ja.
Audience, die jetzt nicht auf der höchsten Ebene ist, wenn wir alle auf dieser Ebene sind, dass wir an den Lippen des Sprechers hängen und was sagt, wir kommen, wir können auf diese Ebene kommen, aber wir sind es noch nicht. Warum ist niemand da sonst?
Also das ist, beides hat seine Richtigkeit.
Klasse und sind auf alle Fälle, also ich meine, ich will das nicht werden, aber Ananda Krishna gibt eine Klasse und sind auf alle Fälle mehr wie bei mir. Warum? Weil er unerhaltsam ist und das geht halt den Leuten auch mehr rein.
Nochmal, ich verstehe das, was du sagst, und das stimmt auch. Also wenn man jetzt hier sieht, dass außer beieinander Krishna alle einschlafen, dann sollte man natürlich was tun. Aber mein Punkt ist, also so wie ich das von meinen Lehrern erfahren habe, geht es bei Bhagavatam darum, dass der Sprecher Krishna glorifiziert. Und weil wenn der Sprecher jetzt anfängt, darauf zu achten, dass auch der letzte Devotee auch wach ist und dass man dann kommst du ja, außer du hast jetzt beides machen, ja, man könnte beides machen, dass man die Devotees wach hält, weil das Krishna erfreut. Ja, heute ist jetzt auch, also ich habe jetzt keinen gesehen, der eingeschlafen ist, aber auch wenn es sehr trocken war. Kishori, du hast deine Hand oben. Ja. Ja, natürlich. Ja. Aha. Ja. Ich denke, das ist halt dann auch wieder, das ist halt genau das, wir alle haben verschiedene Samskaras. Ich habe mein Training bekommen und da war es so, es gab keine Option, ob ich zu Bhagavatam gehen will oder nicht. Also das war einfach, du lebst im Tempel, das musste ich als Brahmachari glücklicherweise, und manchmal gab es Sprecher, wo meine Erfahrung war dann so, wo ich gedacht habe, boah, also ich halte es nicht mehr aus. Das ist so furztrocken. Es zieht sich wie Kaugummi. Und links von mir ist am Schlaf und rechts von mir. Wir hatten einen Brahmachari, der hat immer dann sich so zugewendet zu den Detis. Und dann dachten alle immer, wow, der hat so Taste, aber der hat dann halt so geschlafen. Ne? Aber von meiner Erfahrung, wenn ich dann gebetet habe und die richtige Attitude hatte, dann habe ich dann trotzdem irgendwie eine Erkenntnis bekommen, weil es muss, beide Seiten müssen mitspielen. Weil es ist ja auch geschrieben in Madhurya Kadambini, das eine von den Anatas, außer man steht jetzt vielleicht um 2 Uhr auf und macht ganz viel Service, aber ansonsten ist es so, dass wenn man einschläft, Bhagavatam, es ist ja Madhurya Kadambini geschrieben. Also es steht ja nicht da, wenn du in der Bhagavatam einschläfst, heißt das, dass der Sprecher ausgetauscht werden sollte. sondern es ist, beides muss, glaube ich, mitspielen. Also auf der einen Seite sollte der Sprecher meines Erachtens nach kein Entertainer sein, der darauf achtet, und jetzt stehen wir alle auf und jetzt, also, sondern kann er ja machen, aber es muss wirklich, also es soll um Krishna gehen, und wenn dann halt jemand mal einschläft, dann, ja, also ich denke, beides hat seine Richtigkeit. Was du sagst, stimmt auf jeden Fall auch.
Mir ging es halt bloß darum, weil das halt gerade so ein Thema gewesen ist. Wie kann man das
Interessanter machen.
Community Activities.
Wenn er,
Frühstück, da ist jeder da.
ich meine, klar, das stimmt schon. Also wenn ich jetzt einen Vortrag gebe, ich bereite mich vor und ich bringe mein Herz damit ein, oder ich komme zu Bhagavatam, habe mich nicht vorbereitet, habe mir keine Gedanken gemacht und dann tue ich dann irgendwas da runterreden. Ja, dann, das ist dann aber genau der Punkt. Dann geht es halt dann auch nicht darum, dass ich Krishna glorifiziere und wirklich mein Herz in diesen Service stecke, sondern dann ist klar, dass vielleicht die Devotees dann auch manchmal, aber ich denke, es sind halt beide Seiten, die, ne, also da mitwirken. Okay. Sollen wir das jetzt hier schließen? Ich merke, dass es irgendwie Bhagavatam-Vorlesung scheint auch jetzt so ein Thema gewesen sein. Hier, ne? Das. Okay. Okay? Können wir Bhagavatam schließen? Vortrag? Srila Prabhupada Ki.